Hey, my feel good friend. Have you been struggling to brand your business? I get it. When I first started Feel Good Social, which was actually named something entirely different back then, I was super excited to dive into my branding. But now, looking back, I do realize I really didn't know what I was doing. The creative part of me was just rearing to jump into designing my logo and creating a bunch of pretty graphics, but I never stopped to consider what it really meant to me, how it reflected my business, and if it would actually attract my ideal customers, which I now realize is fairly important. So I've actually ended up going through a rather extensive, sometimes backwards journey of trying to figure out who the heck Feel Good Social is as a brand. And I do think I've finally actually nailed it down. And the funny thing is that figuring out how I could best teach others, like my social map students and one-on-one coaching clients, to bring their brands onto social media in the most purposeful and authentic way has actually helped me so freaking much when it's come to locking down Feel Good Social's branding, which is wonderful and hilarious to me. So today I thought I'd share some of the highlights of what I've learned with Feel Good Social's branding journey and how I now teach branding to my social map students and one-on-one coaching clients so that hopefully you do not have to take the same roundabout journey I've taken. But before we dive in, I do want to remind you that our free 3-day brand vibe challenge is coming in hot. And if you do enjoy everything I have to say in this episode and the way I teach people to bring their brands to the gram, I would love for you to join our challenge now. This free live challenge will help you hone in on your brand's story, voice, and visuals and discover how you can make them all work together to market your brand in the best way. During this challenge, you'll not only be able to ask me a bunch of questions and gain my direct feedback, but if you show up to the trainings and do the work, you'll also receive a very special bonus at the end of the week. Join our free 3-day brand vibe challenge now at feelgoodsocial.com/challenge. I truly hope to see you there, my friend. All right, are you ready to hear Feel Good Social's branding journey? Let's dive in. Hey, friend, and welcome to the Feel Good Social podcast. I'm your host, Kinsey, and I'm here to help you market your business in a genuine way that works without wasting your precious time. On this show, we chat about social media strategy and mindset tips with a focus on, you guessed it, feeling good. So sit back, relax, and enjoy some genuine conversation for the good of your biz. Okay, my friend. So the first thing I want to say is this. If you've already started your branding journey in the same way I did, just creating content willy-nilly with no rhyme or reason, but then you started realizing, I feel like I might need a little more direction so that my brand doesn't feel like that old patchwork quilt from grandma's house. No shame at all, my friend. Do not beat yourself up. A lot of entrepreneurs start out that way, and it does not mean that all is lost. It just means that we have a little strategizing and streamlining to do, and I'm here for it. Now, the second thing I want to cover is what your brand actually is, and I'm going to start by telling you what it isn't. Because when I first started my business, I thought that branding meant my logo, my color palette, my fonts, my business cards, and all of those visual aspects of my brand. But that's just a part of the full picture. And honestly, your brand's visual identity, as it's officially called, I now know, should not really come first. It should actually be influenced by your brand's story, values, personality, messaging, and especially your ideal audience. But do you think that I took all of those things into consideration when I was starting? Of course not. I had this idea of what I thought my brand should look like and what I wanted my brand to be, instead of trying to figure out what my brand actually is. And I dove right in. At first I thought, to be taken seriously as an entrepreneur, I really need my brand to look professional. So I went with black and white. And now that Feel Good Social has a bright-ass color palette, monochrome does seem ridiculous, but how was I to know? So I created the black geometric mountain logo that I still do use today. But when I started designing my website, I quickly realized that I did not have any stylish, minimalist photos that I could use of myself. If you follow Feel Good Social on Instagram, you've probably seen that most of my photos have tons of bright colors and textures. My hair is usually frizzing out, and more often than not, I'm covered in dirt and or dog hair. That's just who I am. And I'm totally okay with it now. But that's when I realized back then that the black and white professional vibe was just not going to work for me. And I was also going through this little entrepreneurial epiphany at the time. And I realized that I was putting way too much pressure on myself, trying to be what I thought an entrepreneur should be. And I could not keep it up. It was giving me way too much anxiety, and I felt inauthentic and unaligned. So I made a conscious decision to start leaning into who I really am in my business. But it was still going to take a little while to get there, because next I really started diving into the concept of branding. And I realized, oh, actually, I don't need to show up as a shiny entrepreneur all the time at all. It's actually a great idea to add a little color and personality to your brand. So that's when I started playing around with more feminine and bohemian vibes, because I saw other women who I adored online creating brands like that. And I thought, oh yeah, that's it. I went through several different color palettes, chose some fonts, created cute graphics, and even started posting to my brand's Instagram account because I thought I'd finally landed on my brand's vibe. And I don't even know how to describe it. It was kind of earthy but pastel-y at the same time. I was gathering moody yet airy, nature-inspired stock photos for inspiration. And I'd found this kind of whimsical, swoopy font that I really loved. I don't know if you can picture what this looks like right now, but it actually worked. I do think that brand vibe felt cohesive eventually, and after some trial and error, of course. But ultimately, I realized it wasn't me. And it wasn't Feel Good Social. It felt like the brand vibe for some deep woods shaman or poetic nature-inspired author, which is who a part of me would love to be, especially after I've had a couple glasses of whiskey and I'm feeling myself for being a quote-unquote deep thinker. Please tell me you've been there before. But overall, no. I'm an overly enthusiastic spaz who thrives when I'm feeling joyful and telling it like it is. And Feel Good Social is for down-to-earth people who can eye roll at Instagram with me and want to learn how to use social media in a straightforward and fun way that won't waste their precious time or make them cringe. And that muted, contemplative, boho femme vibe just wasn't cutting it. But then I felt stuck. I'd started learning my big branding lessons that I shouldn't create the brand I think I should be, and I can't just create the brand I want to be either. Instead, I really need to hone in on who I am and how I want to show up for my ideal audience as a brand. And I had no idea how to turn that into a brand vibe. So I started scrolling Pinterest and looking for inspiration on stock photo sites, and I came across this photo of a person holding an old school movie clapper in the desert. And I don't know how to say this without feeling a little overly sentimental, but it moved me. I felt drawn to that photo for reasons I hadn't yet consciously realized. But what I did think is, yep, this is my brand's vibe. It felt old school yet modern, grungy yet bright, outdoorsy yet not too deep woods. And there's this weird little dude's face that's been etched into the hinge of the clapper that makes me laugh and think, ah, man, I would love to know the story behind that every freaking time I see it. So I downloaded the photo, I sampled my 5 brand colors from the stripes of the clapper, and I added the text, "Let's tell your story," because I realized that's what I want to help people do. And that photo is still the top image on my homepage of Feel Good Social today, if you want to check it out. Since then, I've created my brand's visual identity using that photo as inspiration, with bright colors, bold fonts, grungy adventure photos, and down-to-earth vibes. And while my visual vibe is still evolving over time and I'm still making tweaks here and there, I'm honestly kind of amazed by how much my brand vibe has just seemed to click together. But that wasn't the end of the story because, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, your brand isn't just about your visuals, my friend. It's also about your mission, values, perspectives, motivations, personality, and more. And it's especially about who you're trying to help with your offers and how you want to make them feel. So for Feel Good Social, I was just getting my brand ball rolling. I now knew the basics for how I wanted my branding to look. Plus, I had decided that I want to lean into my authentic self in my business so I could let go of the pressure I was putting on myself and the anxiety I was feeling for always trying to be someone all the time. And the more I started doing that, the more I started getting a feel for the guts and personality of Feel Good Social. I slowly started realizing that I'm not the only person in the world who rolls their eyes at Instagram. I'm not the only person in the world who knows I need to market my brand on social media because it's a free, awesome resource. So duh, it makes sense. But who also hates how much of a time suck, focus suck, energy suck, and soul suck it is. And I realized that I'm not the only person in the world who just wants to freaking market my business on social media in a way that feels good to my soul, that will actually get me results in my business, and that won't waste my precious time or make me feel like I'm losing my mind. So I started crafting my messaging and creating content around that idea. And right around that time, I had another epiphany. I realized that those aspects of social media that I actually want to promote and teach, such as being real and authentic, telling your stories in a purposeful way, nurturing relationships with your real human ideal customers, setting boundaries for yourself so that you don't feel like it's taking over your life, figuring out how you can create a social media plan that's actually doable for you so you don't feel like you're constantly running to catch up, and finding joy in the process. All of those things are actually the best way to market your business on social media. Those things are what will truly get you the best results, and you can feel good about it. So, my friend, Feel Good Social was born. About a year into my business, pretty much when I started this podcast, I realized that is my mission, and those are my values. But it wasn't until I deep dived into how I could teach branding to my social map students that I realized I could have honed in on Feel Good Social's vibe from the very beginning. You see, I do get how hard it is to figure out your branding. And one of the top questions I get from my audience is, how the heck do I take my brand to social media? I was in the process of creating my online course, The Social Map, which I am about to open for enrollment again on May 19th, just saying. And in Module 1, I help my students hone in on their brand's vibe on social media as a part of creating their brand's Instagram strategy. Because in order to create the most purposeful, cohesive, consistent content that will attract your ideal audience and actually get your customers to buy from you, you really got to understand who your brand is. I developed my signature brand vibe method for honing in on your brand's story, voice, and visuals in order to better understand your brand's social media persona so you can create content in the most purposeful and authentic way. Side note, I totally geek out when I talk about brand vibe. And if you want to learn all the ins and outs of my brand vibe method with me, definitely join our free 3-day brand vibe challenge at feelgoodsocial.com/challenge, because I'll walk you through the process, give you feedback, and totally nerd out with you about your brand vibe, especially because I know how much it's helped me with Feel Good Social. Through developing my brand vibe method for my students, I realized that my brand story actually reflects the themes and values of Feel Good Social. I realized that my brand's enthusiastic, non-judgmental, tells it like it is personality actually reflects my Feel Good Social story. And I realized that my visual identity totally reflects Feel Good Social's spazzy personality and down-to-earth values. My brand vibe is wonderfully and somewhat accidentally aligned. And I found that out through creating my brand vibe method and realizing that it actually works, which I did a happy dance for. So, my friend, I know this was a long, roundabout way of telling you that I developed Feel Good Social's branding through a lot of figuring it out, like you might be doing right now. But it doesn't have to be that hard. In hindsight, I know that if I had just stopped to consider all the things I now teach my students with my brand vibe method, I could have landed on Feel Good Social's vibe much sooner. So if you're still struggling to hone in on who your brand is and how you can show up on social media, I would love to help. When you join my free 3-day brand vibe challenge, we can figure out your brand's vibe together so you can be that much closer to creating the business of your dreams, marketing your business with ease, and making the impact you want to make in the world. Are you ready to join me? Just head to feelgoodsocial.com/challenge to sign up now. It's free, it's gonna be a blast, and at the end of the week, you'll know exactly how you can show up on social media in the best way for your brand. Sign up now at feelgoodsocial.com/challenge. I would love to see you there. Thanks so much for listening, my friend. For show notes and a whole lot of other awesome freebies, visit feelgoodsocial.com. Simply go to feelgoodsocial.com for all the goods.